Hello everyone and welcome back to another video. Today I'm going to be discussing a very interesting topic, and that is how camel civilizations are ruining knight play, and specifically ruining how cavalry civs in general are able to play the game. In the past, we used to have civilizations like Indians who got a buff for their camels, but only against range units. However, these days we have civilizations like Hindustani and Gurjaras that get a buff for their camels against cavalry specifically, and this makes it extremely difficult for cavalry civs to function. However, I'm not going to dive right into the topic like that. I'm going to first give you some context as to how we got here in the first place. Now, typically speaking, when you're talking about the meta for Age of Empires 2, the two most important factors to consider is whether the Knight Civs are stronger or is it the Archer Civs. And given how Archer Civs received a very heavy nerf to the mainline crossbows maybe 4, 5, 6 months ago at this point, you might think that Knight Civs started to take over. However, it's not really the case. Basically, Archer Civs took a big nerf with the crossbow upgrade being more expensive, the same for the Arbalest upgrade. Having a double nerf like that on the Archer line was a really significant hit, and a lot of Archer Civs definitely fell for a temporary period until people realized how bad cavalry is in today's meta. Now, the thing is, camels in general have always been a decent counter to knights, and this is mainly because of their mobility. Camels can chase knights, and they do win the one-on-one against a knight. They're also inherently cheaper, costing only 55 food and 60 gold in comparison to 60 food and 75 gold. And so if you have a unit that wins the 1v1 and is cheaper and is faster, camels overall sound like a great answer to knights. However, camels are a bad raiding unit, so if your opponent is on camels and you were the knight player, in the past you'd kind of just give up the map control, maybe sneak in some raids where you can with the knights, or just keep them on defense and maybe try to plan a pike transition so that your cavalry can once again go on the offensive. So we had a way to deal with the camels. We also could mix in some monks and kind of try to overwhelm the camels by outmassing them. And so there were things that we can do, because the camel, although it did win the 1v1, it wasn't by a very big margin. And as I mentioned earlier, back then the best camels really were the Indian ones that didn't perform any better than regular camels against knights. They only performed better against ranged units, or they were better at raiding. However, right now we have civilizations that completely break the balance when it comes to camels versus knights, and specifically two in mind. We got the Hindustani and the Gurjara camel. I will briefly mention here that the Saracen camel also gets a 10 HP bonus in Castle Age and can be further upgraded later on. However, the 10 HP is a lot more manageable because it's a slight bonus. It definitely tips the battles in favor more to the Saracen camel, but it's not an overwhelming advantage that makes it impossible for the knight player to make knights work in that matchup. He just has to play a little bit more smart and a little bit more conservatively. Going back now to the problematic civilizations, the Hindustani and the Gurjaras, we have bonuses that make it absolutely impossible for knight civilizations to use knights in these matchups. For example, the Hindustani camel attacks 20% faster, and the Gurjara camel has 30% bonus damage in Castle Age versus other mounted units, and 40% in Imp. Not only that, the Gurjaras can also mass camels in Feudal Age thanks to their camel scout, so on the way up, if they've got two stables, they can easily pump out 4 to 6 camels, and so before you even get a single knight on the field, they have 6 camels ready to counter you. It's absolutely impossible to play knights against these civilizations. So what are the cavalry civs forced into? The cavalry civs can barely ever play knights. So even if they want to open scouts, which is usually a smooth build order or a smooth strategy with most cavalry civs, they almost have to transition off of scouts into something else. Stuff like early pikemen became popular to counter the camels. Stuff like crossbows is a good opening just to kind of deal with the camels before they get on the field. And stuff like skirmonk defense can also play a big role if the camel civ also mixes in some crossbows. But with all these conditions, with all these situations rather, there is basically no condition to ever play knights. It's simply not ever worth it, because the knight is a very powerful yet expensive unit. However, when you keep the fact that it's an expensive unit, but now we remove the fact that it's powerful because the enemy has camels, it just becomes a very expensive, useless unit, and that is not something that you want to make to win a game. As it stands right now, it's extremely difficult to play cavalry into the civilizations, and as a cavalry civ myself, I'm now forced into playing a lot of archer civilizations, even though the archers did get a nerf recently, just because I'm so scared of my opponent picking camel civs against me in a tournament. Now the thing is, cavalry civs are actually in a good spot. If I've got Franks against an archer civ, I'm going to be pretty confident. Not that I'm going to win every game, of course. Archer civs are still extremely strong despite the nerf, but cavalry civs are in a decent position because now the arbalest timing isn't as oppressive, the crossbow timing isn't as oppressive, these upgrades have been made more expensive, and the cavalry civ has a little bit more time to get things going now, and you don't just lose to arbalest halb every single time. Like I said, you might still lose to them some of the times, but not as bad as it was before. And so the balance between cavalry civs and archer civs at the top level is actually in a great spot. It's really the Camel Civs, the OP Camel Civs, that make playing cavalry extremely difficult. The last thing I want to mention that makes it very difficult for cavalry civs to function against these strong camel civs is this composition that basically counters everything a cavalry civ can make. It's the camel crossbow composition. This is how it's set up. The camel civ will either open archers or scouts in feudal age, and then he'll switch to the other one on the way up. So if you go scouts, on the way up he'll make 2 ranges and start making some archers, and he's still going to have the 1 stable ready. So he's going to have now 2 range expo production plus 1 stable camels. The other way is also possible. He can open 1 range archers and then switch into 2 stables to go 2 stable camel, 1 range archers. That's also fine. Both of these work. Both of these end up with crossbows and camels in castle age, and this is an extremely hard composition to fight off. Basically, knight civs can never engage into this composition, because if you make knights, the camels will tank too much damage since they're pretty tanky. They will also deal a lot of damage to you, and the crossbows will get all that time to do their DPS, and they're not going to get thinned out at all. And as you run away, the camels can chase you and pick off some low HP knights. So knights alone can never work. If you try to go knight skirm, what happens is as the camel numbers start to pick up and they get a lot of camels on the field, the camels counter both the knights, and they do pretty well against the skirmishers, and so their camel unit now becomes insanely strong. So knight skirm doesn't really have a good success or a good chance to work. And if you go knight crossbow, that's probably your best chance, but the problem with doing that is that your knights are just kind of useless in that situation, because if you go knight crossbow, it's going to be mainly the crossbows fighting and not the knight doing anything. And so instead what we're forced into is either pure crossbow and just omit the knight completely, because the camels can just chase the knights around anyways, or we go into like some sort of skirm monk defense. And the problem with this is that none of these compositions have any bonuses for most cavalry civs. Most cav civs don't have arbalest, we don't have any discount for archer line, we usually don't have any discount for skirmisher line, and so we're stuck making units that don't really have any bonuses with our civilization. Whereas our opponent is making camels, which is part of his bonus, and he's got usually a good economy with Hindustan and Gujarat, so he's able to get to expo timing really quickly. And so this camel expo comp, camel crossbow comp, has been proven to be extremely problematic at higher level. And the last thing I'll mention is that not even mangonels really work against crossbow camel, because the camel can easily just snipe the mangonels, or if he starts adding mangonels himself, the table is just reset, and not much can be done anyways. That's going to be it for this video, guys, though. I just want to give you guys a quick update on the meta and how civs are being played out, and just let you know that the camel civs are extremely strong right now at hurting how cavalry civs are being played. Cavalry civs are being forced into something else other than cavalry, which really hurts their development and how they expand into that mid-late game. There's never really any time for the cavalry switch to kick in, and so they end up feeling pretty useless against most of these civilizations. Thanks for watching this video. Hopefully it was entertaining and interesting, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.